I am excited to have our guest today because, in my opinion, he is a superhero. Now, you might deny that, but what he has done has virtually changed the way people withdrawing from drugs will be treated, hopefully change the way they will be treated when they go to jail, especially county jails in rural areas. And it's because of his determination that this whole thing has happened. So I applaud you, and I do call you a hero for your determination, your gutted determination that lasted over 9 years. And because we are so lucky to have him here, we are going to have him on this podcast this week, and then another 30-minute podcast next week, because it takes that long to tell the story of 9 years that began when his daughter passed away in the Duchesne County Jail. And for those of you watching around the world and around the country, it's more of a rural area toward eastern Utah, and certainly not as highly populated as, say, we are in the Tri-County area around the Wasatch Front. So Jared Jensen is his name, and I've known you for 9 years because I worked in TV at the time we broke the story. And it was a sad story at the time. It was, describe your daughter Maddie's death in the Duchesne County Jail. How did she get there?
Well, how she got there was first my wife had a knee surgery that went wrong on the way home, and her body shut down and basically passed away in the car when I pulled in the driveway, and all my kids were there to help her in the home. And we couldn't wake her up to get her out of the car. And then once I called a few neighbors and did some checking on her respirations was about done and over with, where she wasn't alive, basically. So I hurried and got in the car, flipped around, called the hospital, told them we was inbound, told, well, my wife's basically not breathing. I need help. I'll be there in 4 or 5 minutes. As we roll in there, Val come out. He was one of the paramedics right there, and he come out and he checked her and says she's not breathing at all. There's a guy there standing there. He just grabbed a wheelchair. Vaughn actually grabbed her and just threw her in the wheelchair and just grabbed her, and off the trauma bay we went. They rolled her in the trauma bay. 4 guys picked her up, threw her on the bed, and just started working her. IVs up both arms, working her. They got her back in about 15 minutes. But the biggest problem was Madison. The last time she seen her mom, she thought she was passed away. So with the event of that, Madison went on a hiatus, and we didn't know exactly where she's at during the time. And so I ended up finding Madison on Thanksgiving Day at a friend's house. And that's when I found her. And then I said, what are you doing? And she told me what she done. She had a not so good friend where Madison was struggling with thoughts of her mom not being here no more. She did 1.5 grams of heroin that night, the day before Thanksgiving. And Maddie just says, I blacked out, Dad. I don't know what's going on. And I says, Madison, I said, your mom's alive. And she looked at me kind of funny. And so, I knew she felt better knowing that. But so I said, I'm going to call your brother, her brother Mason. And so I called him. I said, you need to take your sister to the hospital. This is what she done. Tell them exactly what happened. Currently, my wife's been in ICU for 10 or 7 days. I can't remember the exact time right now. And so Mason come and grabbed her, took her into the ER. They went through her blood test. Maddie told them what she'd done. They ended up giving her some Klonopin to help blood pressure because her blood pressure was elevated a little bit. And then Madison come to the ICU where I was at, talked with Heather. She stepped in, talked to Heather, said some things, kissed her on the cheek, and then Maddie walked out, and she looked at me. She said, Dad, I'll talk to you at home. And so her and Mason headed down the hallway. Then I got Heather's release forms done, and then we all went home and got in the house, put Heather back in bed, talked with Maddie a little bit, And then the girls started cooking Thanksgiving because after Heather thought she shouldn't be here no more, she wasn't missing Thanksgiving for nothing. So Mallory and Meredith got all the Thanksgiving food done, prepped, the whole 9 yards where Heather's sleeping. I talked with Madison, and she seemed very normal. And so I was fine with that. But after Thanksgiving, everything was good. We started watching Madison, and then it was on Sunday morning, very early. I went in there to talk to her, and when I looked in her room, I thought looked like when she rolled over, there's a piece of aluminum foil on her bed. And I've never done drugs. I don't know what it is. I'm like, well, that ain't right.
Huh.
And then I talked to my dad, and he thought she said, Jared, I think I'm missing one of my prescription bottles, but it's not narcotics that he's on, but one was missing. But he would have been 75 at the time. So I questioned Madison on that, and she absolutely lost her mind like I've never seen before. And she just started yelling and screaming, and this went on for about 10 minutes. And, she said, I'll just kill myself, with other expletives put in there. And I'm like, whoa, this ain't right. And so during this time, I was going back and forth with Heather and Maddie checking for these 3 days.
You got a lot on your plate right then.
Yeah, because my wife, she wasn't supposed to be out of ICU, and the ICU doc says, look, if your wife has any stress, she can go right into cardiac arrest. Her blood pressure is hanging around 54. I mean, it was horrible. Her oxygen sats when they went in 3 days into it, 72 on 5. There's pushing 5, some on the highest they could push her to get her up to 80. But she was coming home. And so so my daughter is acting suicidal. My wife has almost lost her life. So I'm going back and forth across the house, making sure each one of them is breathing. So after Madison said that, knowing that she's a hunter, she knows knives, she knows guns, she could take her own life, there's no doubt she couldn't do it. But my daughter has never, ever talked to me that way in my life. So am I like, is this the drug kicking in? Is there something wrong in her mind that I'm missing, or am I seeing something that's metastasizing? So she just rolled over all of a sudden. She just looked at me, Dad, I'm tired. I want to go to bed. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And so this is 2:30 in the morning. So her door was open. So I sat in the hallway and I watched her sleep. And then I wouldn't move because I knew if she had a chance to do something. I mean, our house, yeah, we have guns, and yeah, they're all in areas where they're locked up, but she knows the codes to them all. So there's a safety factor in mine right there. And I've never dealt with drugs or anything like that, so I don't know what she's going through. So I was trying to be a lot of precaution into that area. So next thing I know is she wakes up, she rolls over and looks at me, and I says, we need to have a talk. What do you mean we need to have a talk? I said, about last night. What do you mean about last night? She didn't even remember what happened. That was the hard part. And so I'm sitting there arguing with her again. I'm like, you said this, this, and that. No, I didn't. And I says, what about that aluminum foil? That's old. That is not new, Dad. And I'm like, okay, whatever, but I don't care about aluminum foil right now. You wanted to take your own life. And she was being very like, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. So my dad was sleeping in the room to the side of her. That's where we let him stay when he comes and visit. He come around, he says, Madison, everything your dad said, like you told him, happened. And she just looked at me and she says, Dad, I don't want to die. And that broke my heart, so I knew something wasn't right. And so so I talked to her and I said, Maddie, we got to figure out what's wrong with you because this can't happen. She says, I don't want Mom to die neither. Let's do something. So we first called the hospital, went back, called the ER, and I told her exactly what she'd done. She says, look, maybe it's a withdrawal thing. I don't know. She says, we already had a pressure monitor cuff at the house. She says, we're going to come in and do her pressure. We're going to send her back because we already gave her the meds. There's nothing we can do for her. I'm like, okay, let's take it another step farther. So I'm like, all right, well, let's call Northeastern Counseling. Well, it's Sunday. Guess what?
They're closed.
Nobody's open. Well, I'm running out of time. We're in a rural area. Well, I am a taxpayer, so why don't I call Victims Advocate, see if I can get something there? I knew the lady that worked there and run it. I called her, and she's like, we're victims advocate. I can't help you in that. But I have seen where if somebody goes into a court holding situation, they're watched, they're monitored, they're in a glass room, she would be safe in there. And I'm like, well, that's a good idea. So, because if she's, and then the other thing is there's medical and everything else that we thought was in the jail, what was described. And so we sat down and talked with Madison. And I says, look, we have no place to go. The hospital won't take you. Northeastern's not going to do it. Victims Advocate gave me one avenue. I says, if you have 10 minutes to yourself and your mind does this, we're going to lose you. And your mom. I could bury both of you. And that wouldn't be good for anybody in this family. And so she agreed right then and there. She says, well, let's see if the sheriffs could help. And I've took a lot of heat because I've called the sheriffs for your daughter. Like, wait a minute. If there's one person or agency who knows drugs, alcohol, abuse is who? The sheriff's department. They deal with it every single day. And plus I know officers that work there and I trust them. So we made a decision to call them to our home. Not that she was in trouble, but we're like, life is more meaningful to let it carry on than let it end by her own hand because we didn't care. So as a taxpayer, I felt that I pay taxes, I pay a fair amount of taxes, that I should have the right to call the county and say, hey, our family needs your help at this time. So we called them. And then roughly after we called them, they said they'd send an officer out. Officer Harrison did show up. Very good man. If anybody ever wanted to see an officer that cared about somebody, Officer Jared Harrison is the one. I never got to see all of his videos until court. He cared about my daughter so much, he wanted her right, and he wanted her safe. So I thank him very much, and it's not me going against the cops or anything. It's what happened in the jail. But I did learn one thing. 2 different officers come to my house. I can't say their name because they're retiring. But they said, Jared, you need to understand one thing. There's a difference between us road patrol and out in the open and the jail system.
Good.
And that broke my heart. I'd never heard that before. I thought everybody was bound by the same law. And he says, no, in there, pretty much the reality is you did something wrong. You're going to pay for it. They're not going to help you, whatever. Just sit and suffer. He says, so I'm sorry about that. But long story short.
So Maddie ends up in jail.
Yep.
Is what happened.
So what happened when he come to the house? So we sat there for 86 minutes. Is how long it was. So he had to call the DA. He also called the task force for narcotics to see if she could help flip the people she worked with. And in that fact, she's going to have help there, medical help there, and be talked to. So that was arranged. And so what they decided to do was the residue didn't pop or smell for the dog on the aluminum foil. But Maddie says, hey, I did this heroin on this date. It should be in my system. So they decided with the district attorneys and everybody at the county that they had arrested her on internal possession, which Maddie was fine with. And so that's what she was booked into jail with, was internal possession. And so that's where that whole saga starts, is the intake in the jail right there.
And she apparently was going through withdrawal in the jail.
Well,
right?
And what I understand is basically 3 days it's out of your system. As soon as you quit taking it, if you don't re-up, your withdrawal starts. I don't know that for sure, but that's what I've kind of learned through this case. It's something that once you're an addict, you maintain your sanity by continuing to use. If you stop cold turkey, then that's when your withdrawals really hit.
So and we should, for people who don't understand Duchesne County, you're very rural.
Yes.
You're what would you call yourself? A rancher, a hunter? You love.
I love hunting, and so is my daughter. But we're just a ranching family now. We have. When Maddie passed away, she wanted a ranch, so we went and bought 3 ranches for her. We call it Madison Ranches up on Facebook. You can find it there. But
okay. But you were pretty dumb about drugs.
I've never done illicit drugs in my life. Right. I have no idea.
Yeah. So Maddie's in jail, and you think she's going to be monitored and taken care of as she goes through what appears to be withdrawal.
Yes. And we was explained that by the officer that there'd be no chance of her taking drugs in there again. There'd be medical help and oversight would be watching her. So me as a dad, I'm like, this is great. Yeah. Nobody can slip in there and say, hey, do a shot of this.
And the other thing is in Duchesne County, because you just described what the help you tried to find, you don't have the resources that we have here, say, in Salt Lake County. Right?
No, that county, I think it's 9,600 people total.
Yeah. So
that's like 10 blocks in Salt Lake, maybe, or even 5.
Okay. So we have 15 minutes left in this segment. So what happens in jail? And this is the hard part.
Yep. What happens in jail right off the bat? She was supposed to see a judge Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. I had no phone calls on a court date. I was concerned. So by 8 o'clock, 8:30, I called the district attorney's office to talk to Stephen Foote. He was in a court proceeding at the time, and so I talked with his assistant. She says, the judge won't be coming in. We're going to have to move Maddie till Friday. And I said, well, that ain't good. My goddaughter has all these issues. This ain't right. And she says, look, there's one thing you can do. If you call the non-emergency number, dispatch, they will send the sheriff to the jail. They will get an update on your daughter, and he will drive to your home and give you the update on your daughter. And so I'm like, great. So that was on Monday. Tuesday, he shows up at my house, and I asked the question, how's Maddie doing? She's working with the officers. She's talking with them and communicating. We never said she's been projectile vomiting that happened Sunday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday morning. She can't walk. She's has diarrhea so bad. She soiled herself twice. They're making her roommate clean, or her cellmate clean that mess up. I mean, it's just atrocious what they're doing to her.
That's what you found out after.
That's what I found out.
That's not what you were told.
That's not what I was told. At home, she's working with everybody. I'm like, that's great. My daughter's doing what she needs to do. We can get through this and get her the help she needs by Friday.
So you're relieved to hear that, right?
Well, I was relieved so much. I had a surgery scheduled 3 weeks earlier. I went ahead with it on that Wednesday, the Thursday she passed. So I woke up out of anesthesia and I come home as the same day. I woke up with 2 cops at my door knocking saying your daughter passed away.
How many days after she went into jail did she pass away?
4.5 days from Sunday. Dehydration. It was AFib due to mass dehydration.
And what about the promise of medical help?
She never got it. To break down in the court case, she only had one, as they call it, blue horse, where anything that happens to an inmate or an officer sees something, they type it in and log it for that inmate. One time it noted that she didn't eat her meal. One time she got 1 Gatorade the entire time. That's all the notations she had. And 1 blood pressure was recorded, and that was it in the 4.5 days.
And she was puking her guts out.
Projectile vomiting is how it was. She puked so hard, it went up on the ceiling and come down off of her bed and was dripping on her cellmate while she was sleeping.
And they just left her in the cell.
They left her in the cell. And the stench was so horrific that her cellmate asked to be moved because she couldn't stand the smell in there.
Did she get moved?
She got moved the day after that.
So was Maddie in there alone?
No, right when that happened, they moved her out. Then from what I understand, they put Maddie in medical holding, which is lockdown, basically. So she's by herself in a cell with no other cellmate.
And Maddie was how old at the time?
21.
So you have a 21-year-old girl, sick as hell, in a cell by herself, and she passed away.
Yep.
And when you heard the news, what were your feelings?
How does somebody pass away with all these, a medical provider and all these jailers watching her? We understood she'd be in court holding. Court holdings where you're monitored and watched on a camera 24/7. Well, that happened, but they never monitored or watched her. I mean, even her death video was there, and nobody even seen her dying. The control lady said she never even looked to check if Maddie was doing good or passed away. She just has to look left or look right, and it's right there. All the screens wrap her on everything in that jail is watched 24 hours a day and video recorded. Maddie, it took her over half an hour to pass away. Nobody ever seen it. but the video camera.
Do you believe this story? I mean, you can see why. I don't know how I heard about it. I think I heard about it from another parent of a woman who died in the same jail, who killed herself.
That was Tana Joe.
Yeah, and so that's what led me as a reporter to go out and talk to Jared and heard this whole story. And it's like, well, how can that happen? I mean,
Like, at no point in this story does any of it seem even logical.
I know.
How do they not? I mean, what are their rounds? How often are they supposed to check on inmates? And
Well, it's what you come to find out, and we're going to continue with what happened after this, but you come to find out, and I hate to use the terms, but it's pretty much a good old boy system
100%.
in the jail. And there's a lot of people there who are related to each other, who are brothers, sisters, cousins.
Married in, yep.
Yeah. And so
so a family runs the jail?
well,
To a point.
yeah, to a point, but they all stick together pretty close. I mean, when I did my first stories on this, I actually ran into a couple of people who were related to people who worked in the jail, and they actually said they were going to come and kill me. I don't know if I ever told you
No.
that. And they said, "You bastard, you're screwing up things in our county," and that's the close-knit community that Jared had to deal with after he found out his daughter died under very unusual circumstances. And there, I remember one thing that depressed me was her weight going in and her weight when they weighed her body after she died.
They still fight that tooth and nail. We have her gynecologist or OBGYN's paperwork. She is 129, like the week before she went in. And then the weight we had from the medical was like, it was 112 or something like that.
In just 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, but she threw up the entire time she was there. She never stopped. People don't understand, but she actually wrote a note on Tuesday that says, "I've been puking, throwing up, can't even hold water down. I may have the stomach bug. I know my body, I'm not detoxing. Something's wrong with me."
Yeah.
And they disregarded it and didn't do nothing for her.
And well, they did give her Gatorade. They offered Gatorade.
Well, they gave her one, but what we learned is when the body shuts down, it can't process liquids anymore. We found out there's a rehydration issue. If your body's shutting down because you're so sick, that fluid will sit in your stomach and it'll never pass.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. So
It has to be IV.
that has to be an IV. And that was the biggest thing. Dr. Brown at U of U, he was one of our professional experts, and he says all they had to do was 30 minutes before she passed, give her one IV, she'd be here today.
Wow.
That's it.
And they could, and now I guess I'm trying to think how we can logically continue this because it came out in court and everything, but they did have options in the jail to get her to a hospital, did they not?
Yeah, they admitted to that. All they had to do is either make a call or call an ambulance or take her in a squad car.
So that's all they would have had to do.
All they had to do is drive 30 minutes down the road.
And she'd still be alive.
Was the belief that she was just dope sick and deserved it or something?
That's how we feel. I mean, there's the video, and if you watch the Channel 2 story, she walked out of her cell and fell down and collapsed into a chair, and the jailer did nothing. She never got a shower because she couldn't even walk. 3 times they admitted that she needed a wheelchair to go to her cell. Even with the task force, he even on the stand says, Maddie says, "I'm too weak to walk to my cell. Would you give me a wheelchair?" No, they made her crawl.
This is like a horrible movie.
It is.
It is. I've seen dogs treated better than my daughter. I mean, even in the cell right before she passed away, they made her clean up her bedding. She is so weak she couldn't walk it to the door. She had to push it on her knees to the door. And then she's trying to lift it up to get to the door, holding herself up on the door, breathing hard. And then she passed away 4 hours after that.
Well, they have video.
It's all on video.
I mean, it's not pleasant video to watch.
Well, yeah, but
but it is proof that obviously something went wrong and that she was not taken care of the way she should.
Well, basic dehydration, the vomiting, diarrhea, not able to hold anything down. That's pretty basic. Not even having anything to do with drugs.
And it wouldn't have happened in a jail like the Salt Lake County Jail because they deal with this and they're afraid of lawsuits like you filed. And when we started out this part of the podcast, I said, this will probably change the way, especially rural county jails, deal with people who are supposedly in drug withdrawal.
Well, I can tell you right now, there's 2 RNs and 2 LPNs in that Duchesne County Jail now. They hired them right after Maddie passed away.
And what did they have when Maddie was there?
An LPN, because she was $8 an hour cheaper.
That's
than
it.
RN. Even the professional expert they hired, who was the medical staff physician, he says for 3 years I asked Duchesne County to hire an RN, and they said we can't find one, and they're too much money. So they chose to go that route. The next thing in this case that come out, Dave Bourne on the stand admitted he did not want to be a certified jail. It was too much paperwork. Duchesne County is still not a certified jail in the state of Utah.
So, but things are changing, like you said. And the other thing that came out right after her death, when you were trying to pursue all this, is where's the doctor? And explain that one.
Well, the doctor lives 4 to 5 hours away. There's no in-house doctor, which can be normal for rural jails, but throughout the whole court case, they kept, anybody can call. We always want to do the right thing. Nobody will get in trouble, just call an ambulance, we don't care. Well, nobody called an ambulance. A regular person like the jury seen, a female that can't walk and collapses into a chair, something's wrong with her, call somebody.
Yeah.
The people are paid on an annual contract. It don't matter if you call them 20 or 30 times.
That was a choice.
That's why P.A. Logan walked off this case, which we understood. He was in the case because there's a lot of paperwork that we found that was developed by Duchesne County, not him. And so he was able to walk out of the case, which that was fine because he did nothing wrong. Because when he showed up at the jail, my daughter was alive at 7 a.m. He was never told about my daughter until 1:30 when he left the jail. Oh, by the way, there's a sick girl you need to come see. But she wrote a sick request and nobody sent him in there to her. If he had seen her first because she was direly ill, she'd be here today.
Yeah.
She was alive in there for 6 hours while the physician was right there. Who could have started an IV right then and there?
So that was a PA and like a full-fledged doctor who they had on call only went out to the jail once a week.
Once a week.
And then looked at a sheet of, well, these people claim they're sick.
If you get sick on a Friday, you don't see one till Thursday, a doctor. That's it.
I mean, the whole thing, it made me angry, and I think it made a lot of people angry. But they stuck to their guns and wouldn't admit that they did anything wrong.
That was throughout this whole case. We just wanted to know the facts, and they kept, it just from the slinging dirt was all they wanted to do. We didn't do nothing wrong. Your daughter's a drug addict. It even come out in court exactly when she started her use when she went to college. Because Colorado's legal to smoke marijuana. Guess what a stepping stone is? I don't care what anybody says. It went from marijuana and then cheap heroin. And she said she even done a little bit of meth. And this was all in an 18-month window.
Yeah.
That's how long or how fast it got a hold of my daughter.
So you've heard what led up to what we're going to talk about in our next episode. And I'll just throw out a little tease that Jared fought this battle throughout the court system for the next 9 years and recently was in federal court and a jury found, I shouldn't give it all away, but there's a multi-million-dollar settlement that came out of this whole thing. So we'll talk about that in our next edition of Odyssey House Journals. We'll find out what happened. Thanks for watching and listening.